17 about living organisms and the characteristics that they share. And so this section says living organisms, and this word is share. I know there's a glare, but the word is share. Living organisms share many characteristics, such as having enzymes. We're going to talk a lot about enzymes this year and how they help organisms build things and break things down. When you digest your food, you're using enzymes to digest your food. When you build your hair and nails out of protein, you're building that using enzymes. And so these characteristics can be described in many different ways. You might hear things like car smog or a rare hog or made of cells respond to the environment. But we're going to look at it by listing all of the processes. Please circle all of the processes that living organisms perform. We're going to remember them by remembering these letters. S-T-E-R, stir, and then STERNGRR, STERNGRR. And we do this in North Carolina because the North Carolina end of course test focuses on these 8 main processes. For example, the word synthesis. Synthesis means to build. So put a little box around this because the shortest definition that you can memorize is that synthesis means to build. But it doesn't mean to build a house. All of these processes are being performed in the body of the organism. So when we talk about synthesis and building and making, we're not talking about making a sandwich or building a house. We're talking about building your body structures like hair and nails. When we talk about plants, we might be talking about synthesizing something like nectar. This also has to do with things like hormones that send signals within the organism's body. So when we talk about synthesis, we're talking about building or making something. The next process that all living things perform is called transport. This is where organisms move, but we're not talking about running and jumping and swimming and slithering, because we know that things like plants, they're living, they don't run or jump, but they do move things within their body. In animals, we talk about using blood. In plants, we might talk about moving water. We might talk about moving food. All of those are examples of things that get moved within an organism's body. The next trait that we look at is excretion. This is when organisms get rid of waste. So you do need all of these parts here. Excretion is getting rid of waste. So this could be solid waste like feces, or plants will actually get rid of some extra leaves. They might kill the leaves and get rid of them. So think about in the fall when plants are releasing those dead leaves. Liquid, usually in the form of water, and gas. We're actually going to talk about how animals release CO2 as their waste gas, but plants are actually going to be releasing oxygen as a waste gas. The fourth one that we're going to look at is called regulation, and it means to control. Control your body, for example, temperature. It might be how much water your body is having. It might be your responses. So when we talk about regulation, the animal brain really has a lot to do with regulation. But when we talk about plants, when do plants flower? Not very many plants flower in the winter. Most flower in the spring and the summer. And that has to do with the organism controlling their body. So we've just talked about stir. Next we're going to talk about STERNGRR. These processes we're going to see all year. But this is how we define something that is living. In order to be considered living, it must do all 8 of these things at some point in its life cycle. Next we have nutrition. This is when you either make or consume food. Now when we talk about animals, animals are consumers, but plants make their own nutrition using photosynthesis. The synthesis word comes back already. Growth and development. Multicellular organisms get bigger in a variety of ways. And so we're going to talk about things like cell division. If you remember the word mitosis, mitosis is one of the ways that organisms grow and get bigger. So when we talk about plants, how does a plant go from a seed to a fully developed plant? It has to do with growing and developing. Respiration. Now this one I want you to put a big star by because it's the one that you're probably going to have to practice the most. When most people think of respiration, they think of breathing because you have your respiratory system, your nose and your mouth and your pharynx that leads down into your lungs. But respiration in science is actually going to mean breaking down carbs to get energy. You do need to memorize that whole definition, breaking down carbs to get energy. We are going to talk about that in living organisms, their energy comes in the form of ATP. Often when we perform respiration, we need oxygen. But notice that's only often. It's not always. We're going to see something called anaerobic respiration. Every single living thing, organisms all need to perform respiration. So whether it's a plant, an animal, a fungus, a bacteria, a protist, or an archaeobacteria, every single living thing performs respiration where they break down carbohydrates to get energy. The last STERNGRR trait is reproduction. This is where organisms make offspring, either asexually or sexually. Every single living thing produces or attempts to produce offspring at some point during its life cycle. Together, these STERNGRR reactions and processes make up every organism's metabolism. Go ahead and circle this word, it's an important word. Your metabolism is all of the reactions in your body. So all living things perform these. And so when we look at metabolism, we talk about breaking things down, building things up, having extra pieces. An organism must complete all 8 processes to be considered living. Organisms also regulate their internal conditions in a process called homeostasis. And we're going to be exploring this word, homeostasis, a lot this year as well. How do you control these processes? So the STERNGRR 8 processes: synthesis, transport, excretion, regulation, nutrition, growth and development, respiration, and reproduction. You do need to memorize them. All 8 of these make up an organism's metabolism or reactions. How the organism controls that is called homeostasis. This is the end of the notes for this section. And so you do not need to take the notes that are found here. We'll be taking these later in the year.